Now out in cinemas is the final entry in the Indiana Jones franchise, The Dial of Destiny, costing in the region of nearly $300 million, a large chunk of that probably going to Harrison Ford's salary to reprise the famous archaeologist, with Steven Spielberg stepping back to act as an executive producer, with Kathleen Kennedy and her husband Frank Marshall acting as producers, and James Mangold taking over as the director. James had directed Logan and Le Mans '66. Having a fresh pair of eyes on a franchise was probably seen as a good thing, as Spielberg seemed to be asleep at the wheel on the previous film. Harrison Ford and James Mangold both felt that Crystal Skull did not do enough to highlight Jones's age, and the new era in which he lives. Mangold said that Jones's age would be a major part of the film. According to the director, Dial of Destiny is about age, time and relationships with family, and how someone in their later years experiencing old age despite once having been a great hero, which led him to settle on the time-related Antikythera mechanism as the film's MacGuffin, when he decided to use the age of both Ford and his character as a feature to highlight how time travels for all of us as we get older and the world changing around us, even if the film isn't about aging. The reviews published once it got its premiere screening at the Cannes Film Festival, things weren't entirely great, with many mixed reviews, with some critics loving it and others being very underwhelmed. Empire magazine gave the film 4 out of 5 stars, complimenting Ford's performance, and noted Mangold's camera work that moves confidently through action set piece after action set piece, keeping up the frantic pace. Variety described the film as eager but ultimately rather joyless piece of nostalgic hokum. The Hollywood Reporter criticised the film, writing, "It's a big bombastic movie that goes through the motions but never finds much joy in the process, despite John Williams' hard-working score, continuously pushing our nostalgia buttons and trying to convince us we are on a wild ride." Robbie Collin of The Telegraph was pretty harsh. He praised Ford's performance, but felt the film's action scenes were loaded with mayhem but painfully short on spark and bravado. There's no shot here nor twist of choreography that makes you marvel at the filmmaking mind that conceived it. For the film's story, it opens in 1944 during World War II. Indiana Jones and his colleague Basil Shaw are in the French Alps to recover artifacts stolen by the Nazis. They prevent Jürgen Wöhler, a Nazi scientist, from obtaining the Archimedes dial, which was broken into 2 pieces, a device many claim can travel through time. Jumping 25 years later to 1969, Jones is about to retire from his teaching position. His goddaughter Helena Shaw turns up out of the blue and wants to know the whereabouts of the dial. Little do they know Wöhler, who since the war has joined NASA and helped them with the Apollo mission to the moon, and is in lead with the CIA to get the dial. Helena accompanies Jones on his journey for the second half of the Archimedes dial, before Wöhler and his henchmen get their hands on it. I went into this film with my expectations slightly lowered, due to the fact that the majority of the internet had decided that it wasn't very good, even listening to feedback from folk who hadn't seen it, making their opinions a bit pointless, but the reviews that came out after its premiere at the Cannes Film Festival were pretty mixed, as highlighted earlier. I thought, okay, we might be falling into similar issues that arose with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which didn't make the fans as vocally aggressive as the Star Wars prequels, but it was deemed disappointing and a pretty boring film for what was at the time the final adventure of Indiana Jones. But now we have the 5th and final entry into the franchise, and to my surprise it was pretty good. It's not going to top the original trilogy, but the story, performances and overall vibe to it felt more like an Indiana Jones film than the 4th entry. The film does focus on Indy's age, with Harrison at 80 years old. You can't expect someone of that age to be jumping into big punch-ups and saving the day. Crystal Skull did explore the difficulties of him being older, but they did it more for comedy, where Dial of Destiny it treats it with a bit more respect. The Indiana Jones films are always stuffed with action, making them very memorable, due to their approach of in-camera stunts and special effects with cars and things exploding. Dial of Destiny, I would say, has the weakest action sequences for me. They are a bit chaotic and overstuffed, and go on for a bit too long, a prime example being the chase on the tuk-tuks. You don't see Indiana getting into many fights. He uses his whip maybe once outside the opening flashback sequence, and he gets to use a gun for a short scene. He acts more in a way of escaping or going along for a ride. What the film really excels at for me is the adventure itself, of Indy and Helena trying to find the dial. The interactions and cliched exposition dumps at times I found most enjoyable. I love the moments where Indy explains the history of the dial and his friendship with Helena's father, and his confrontation with the Nazi Jürgen Wöhler. Mads Mikkelsen, as always, makes for a great villain, totally calm and cool, but he has this desire for power that has brought him and Indiana back together for another conflict after World War II. But you do get a great sense that Jürgen is a bit underdeveloped, as you don't get much of his backstory. With Helena Shaw, the amount of moaning and drama surrounding her role in the movie was getting a bit out of hand. People felt the actress Phoebe Waller-Bridge was going to ruin the series. The amount of complaining and predicting she was going to wear Indy's hat and take over was just getting so silly. If you watch the film, she's an entirely different character. She's not designed to fill Indy's shoes. Sure, she's educated like him and can look after herself, but she's not about preserving history and storing these ancient artifacts in a museum. She's all about the money and selling them on the black market. She's a bit selfish but charming as well. She can come across as slightly irritating in some scenes, but for the majority of the movie, Phoebe plays the part really well and contributes to the light-hearted moments in the film where it needs it. Her assistant, the kid called Teddy, seems a bit of a redundant character, however. He's only in there to service the plot for him to steal something or fly a plane at one point, which they kind of allude to earlier in one scene where he's having some training, but it's a bit ham-fisted. Having John Rhys-Davies return as Salah was nice to see, but he did feel shoehorned into the movie. The visual effects for the film, handled by ILM, are pretty top-notch throughout. The de-aging on Harrison for the opening sequence was really amazing. There are a few shots where it's not 100% perfect due to the lighting, but I was impressed considering the length of the opening sequence. It's like a mini Indiana Jones 4 if they made one in the 1990s. For the rest of the film, the effects do hold up well. The ticker tape parade was a visual treat. Eye-popping photography. The whole film has a wonderful look to it, capturing the period setting very faithfully, and though being shot digitally, it does look very filmic. John Williams, who I thought was going to make this his last movie to score, but thankfully he recently announced he was going to continue composing for movies for as long as he can. He calls upon the themes we all love and delivers the energy for the action scenes, but what makes the score most impressive is the intimate moments, which are wonderfully presented in the sound mix and complement the film throughout. The film does have its issues. It's a bit too long in areas, and the final act may be a bit too far-fetched for some to accept in an Indiana Jones movie. But I do think the film is handled with respect and care. I felt a bit sad by the end. The music strikes the right chord to get you emotionally charged. Throughout you feel a bit sorry for Indy and where he is in his life, and the film I think successfully creates a more mature outlook on where he is and dealing with old age. That may not sound particularly exciting for some people, and probably those of a younger age, they may find the film a bit dull throughout, as the action never hits the dizzying heights of the original trilogy, and there is a sense of going through the motions. With it being over 30 years since the original trilogy, it's shown us that it's very tough to compete with those films. It seems like a difficult mountain for the filmmakers to climb. Just ticking off boxes to make sure the fans are happy may sound great on paper, but it's never truly going to satisfy everyone. But I do think for long-time fans of Indy, there's a lot of interesting stuff in the film, and Harrison Ford does a superb job. He doesn't look bored and he gives it his all, and I think it concludes Indiana Jones and his adventures more successfully compared to the efforts on Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and click the bell to be notified of my latest retrospectives and reviews. Big thanks to my patrons for supporting the channel. If you want to get involved and gain early access to my content and exclusive videos, then follow the link below.